Daniel Pemberton, The Trial of the Chicago Seven is your third film with Aaron Sorkin. So what has this collaboration been like with you guys over the years?
Aaron is like super nice to work with. It's kind of weird because I always had this idea that he'd be quite a scary character, but he's like a super warm, collaborative, really interested in your opinion. He's got strong views himself, but there's always like a good space for us all to like, discuss them, argue about them, stick up for one idea, he'll stick up for his ideas. And it's like a really good filmmaking process where you're all part of the same team, just trying to make the best movie you can.
So what were your early conversations like about the Chicago Seven score?
Well, Chicago Seven was super random because I met Aaron for a drink in the Four Seasons bar in Los Angeles, which is, if you ever meet Aaron Sorkin, it would generally be in the Four Seasons bar. I don't know if he's sponsored by the Four Seasons hotel chain, but if he's not, he should be, as he's a big fan. And I was out there for like a few days, and we had like a chat in the bar, and he'd already mapped the whole film out. He'd already worked out what he wanted to do with the music, how he saw the whole film structured like musically, which is like really cool because it's great when a director really understands what music can do to a score and has already like worked it into like really like detailed work it into like how they've structured the film up. And so right from the top, he was like, this film is like four big pieces. It's the opening, it's the two riots, and it's the ending to take us out. And he was like, that's the bit where the music's got to count. Like those bits have to just be like, boom, right in your face, like really strong, bold bits of scoring. So we kind of went through that. Then I went back to England, and then I didn't see anyone else again, ever. Like, just there.
And we never will again.
In real life. I saw them a lot on Zoom and Skype, but then we had like Corona and all this other stuff. And so it was really weird for me because like I did the whole film like with no physical contact with anybody involved in the film making process in America, which was a bit sad actually. I kind of missed it, but we kind of, we're chatting a lot on Zoom, so it was a different experience. But there was, we're still going back and forth the whole time. Probably more than we would have done if it was more physical.
Yeah, definitely. So what was that whole process like, not just writing the score, but recording it when you couldn't be in the same room with people?
It was tricky as rude word to start off with, because it was like, just, you had to like when you write a score, like everyone likes to think you're just thinking, hey, like you just do whatever you want, just go record it. But you're dealing with so many things like logistics, like how much can I spend to make this work through the budget they've given me, like how are we going to organize these recording sessions, because I always do quite complex scores that are not everybody in the room at the same time. And it's like, how can we get the most out of everyone, and how can we like factor in some kind of improvisational moments and like experimentation into a structure. And that's always like a big like headache anyway, like when I'm doing a big score. But when you've got like this extra bonus of like COVID and only allowed so many people in the room at once, and you can't have the brass play at the same time as the strings, it's like a right old nightmare. But we got there, and actually it was all right in the end. It wasn't, I think I got lucky because this score was not a traditional. If it was, it would have been very, very tricky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of non-traditional, like the music for the riot scenes, like it felt like extended guitar and drum solos at a rock concert, but it really does like capture the chaos and the passion of it all. Was that something that Aaron wanted, like that sound?
Yeah, like I really wanted those scenes to really just throw you into that moment, and really like chaos is a really good word for that. It's about the building chaos and the viscerality of what's happening, and the violence and the tension and the anger, and like kind of elements of rock music, which are like guitar and drums, are really good for getting that across, because you can get a chaos, really. Like, I tried to write originally that piece, I called it a piece for like orchestra and guitar feedback, was the original idea. And I wanted to kind of have the instability of guitar feedback and just very dissonant guitars, like throughout that piece, exploding when the kind of the riot like blows up, but at the same time have some kind of musicality control over that, so it's not just like a bunch of noise. And so that's always the thing I'm really interested in, is like, how close can you get a piece of music to kind of chaos, and yet still retain the musical elements of it and retain the kind of emotional elements rather than just abstract atonal noise. And in those riots, it was like they were just tailor-made for that kind of approach, where you've got this, you got a crowd of like people, and they're kind of marching as one, but they're not, because they sort of, everyone's doing their own thing, and everything's out of control. There's a huge instability there, but as a group, it's kind of doing this and getting bigger and bigger, but it's like, it's like unstable. And so I wanted to get that through the music. Whereas if you had something that was like more traditionally scored or notated, that movement would be very smooth. Whereas I wanted that thing that's like kind of chudding around and feels like it's going to blow up or is blowing up.
Yeah. Well, I also really like the opening montage score. Well, the montage itself is establishing the characters and events, but the score is also very urgent, and it's guitar based again, and it builds and builds until you get the title card. So what was it like writing that one?
That took a long time, shall we say? Yeah, because that's really interesting, because like Aaron wanted to have like an ironic counterpart to the imagery you're seeing, because the imagery is like kind of America going to hell in a way, and the music's like, hey, America's great, and it's really upbeat and peppy, and he wanted something that really pushed against the imagery. And you have to meet all the characters and other characters through that thing, and so I had to like write this piece that would introduce every character and every different beat and build over 7 minutes, culminating in the theme, which is based on the song that you hear at the end, and it not get boring and constantly build. And so that was like a really exhausting piece of music to write, because we kept changing it like that. Like every day I would rewrite that piece, and then we'd all get on a call in the evening with Aaron and Alan, the amazing editor on this film, and just kind of kick it about and find out what was working and what wasn't. And I think that was for all of us. I think Aaron was working out how to make that scene work, and I was trying to work out what he was responding to and what I felt. And so we did about like 19 versions of that track.
Wow.
But that's what you got to do. It makes the opening great. It's a big, exciting opening. And it's, I think there's so much information to take in. And with all Aaron's films, there's always so much information. And it's trying to find that key point between like having character, having identity, and musical sort of interest, but at the same time not overpowering all this other stuff that's coming at you from imagery to information. And that opening, obviously it's the opening of the film, so there's a lot riding on it, but it's a very exciting and unexpected intro to the film, and I think puts you on the back from the beginning, because he didn't want it to feel like how I wanted to score originally, which was like, I want to do a big psychedelic rock track. And he like, that's exactly that's what everyone's going to expect. And he was right, because that's what I was thinking. Oh yeah, I get to do like crazy Jimi Hendrix style solos. And by going slightly against that and against what you'd expect, it instantly makes the audience look at something differently and take in the information differently. And that's always a good thing in my book.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that same vein, like Aaron is famous for his writing, and there's a lot of talking in this movie. So how do you find that balance of scoring these talky scenes but not taking away from his words?
There's always lots of talking in Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah.
Uh, it's great. Like Aaron's talking is like kind of like a beautiful melody that you have to play with, and like I've done it like it's like my third film with his words in, and what I really like is when we get to the bit that I call like in Steve Jobs we had it, and in this as well, which I kind of call the Sorkin symphony. And that's when you have the really big piece where you're like, it's all been building up to this big conversation. And that's kind of the riot near the end, Blood on the Streets, where Eddie Redmayne's character is caught on tape saying, let the blood flow. And it's huge, like 7-minute piece. And I just spent, it's like a really key moment in the film. And I just spent a long time just working that, just trying to find the rhythm of the performances, the rhythm of the dialogue, and match that with the score in a way that hopefully you never notice that it's trying to move around, change pace, change tempos. It takes a long time to make it feel like it's quite simple, but it's really exciting to do when you get it right, because you can like when you can really like accentuate some of the performances, accentuate the action, and just make the whole thing feel really cinematic. Mm-hmm. At the same time, provide space in what you write for the kind of lead line to come through, which is the dialogue. Yet at the same time, bring little musical ideas in and out of that. It's really cool. It's like doing an action scene. It's like doing an action scene in a movie where you're working with things blowing up and sound effects, but you've got something way more exciting, which is his fantastic words.
Mm-hmm. You also wrote the ending song, Hear My Voice. Was that also an Aaron request?
Well, early on, Aaron wanted to finish the film with Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. He was very keen on the film having a kind of upbeat ending that sort of like took you to the future and said, you can change, things can change. But we kind of like, everyone kind of worked out that the Beatles didn't really work because everyone's got too much baggage with that. So we talked about trying to write an original song for the end. So I started off on that. And I was trying to work out like, how do you encapsulate like the entire idea of this film into a song, the idea of protest, but make something as simple as possible? Because I always think the best songs are very simple concepts that have a very powerful meaning. And I was, just going through it, and I kind of realized like everything about protest is about your voice, and about the reason people protest is their voices are not being heard. And that is everything about protest, is no one's hearing their voice. That's why they protest. So it's like those 3 lines, I was like, oh my God, that's it, hear my voice. So I started working with that, trying to write this song, like Hear My Voice, Hear My Dreams, like kind of got it going, but I hadn't finished it. And I also needed to find someone to like perform it. And there's this amazing singer called Celeste, who I'm a huge fan of. She's got like one of the most beautiful voices of anyone around. And I just thought it'd be amazing if I could get her to get involved with it, and reached out to her, and she was super up for it. So that was really powerful. So together we finished the song off, and it's just turned into this really like it's like for me really powerful song. And there's a couple of things interesting about that. Once that was written, I kind of like, that was like actually quite early on in the process, like midway through, I kind of reversed engineered the score, because the whole score really is about leading up to that moment at the end. So everything through the film before that is kind of trying to feed you towards this moment of the song at the end. So we take the melody of the song, it's used in countless different ways all through the film. Little elements of that song are all pulled apart and snuck into the score. So you get a journey like where you don't realize, hopefully, until the very end, and you hear that song, that you've been waiting for this moment all the way through.
It's subliminal. So
Yeah, and then the other thing that's really interesting about that song is when we wrote it, like the world kind of changed during this process, like in lots of ways, especially with like the kind of reemergence of a very strong protest culture in America. Um, and you know, this song, you know, who's like really simple ideas of like, hear my voice, hear my dream, let me see a world in which I believe, which was written really for these events and these characters in 1968 and 1969, suddenly like that was like completely relevant to everything that was happening on the news. You was watching the news, seeing the Black Lives Matter protests and events like that, and it was just like, wow, this is really weird. Like everything in this is completely current and timely, yet also totally fits with the film, which I think is a real testament to like the power of that film and the power of what's the experience Aaron's given you on that
yeah, the message of the film entirely, and then just the timelessness too of something like that.
Yeah, sadly, I mean, I'd like it if we didn't have to protest the whole time,
Yeah.
but and at the same time, like, hey, everyone protests. It's like it's better to be able to do that than no protest because you're not allowed.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Daniel, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.